start with the summit. I think the mood will almost certainly be a sort of good mood summit, because it's Wen's last and people will want it to go out on a nice note with him. I guess there'll be some discussion of the agreement that they will start negotiating next year on an investment accord between the EU and China to replace the Partnership and Cooperation Agreement, which has got stuck and has more or less been forgotten, the much more ambitious agreement. Instead of that, there'll be an investment agreement which, from the EU's point of view, will get better market access for European companies, and from the Chinese point of view, will safeguard their investments in Europe better, indeed get better access to European markets. I think the Europeans think the Chinese have been quite helpful on the euro. The Russians make a point of not even trying to conceal their schadenfreude about the euro crisis. The Chinese are polite to us on the euro crisis. How much they've really helped in terms of buying up bonds, I have no idea. Perhaps somebody can tell me. I suspect not a huge amount, but they've sort of said nice things and tried to reassure us that they believe in European integration, as I'm sure they really do. But the strategic partnership that the EU has with China is, of course, not strategic. It's not strategic because it focuses mainly on economic issues. It's not strategic because there's no prioritization. There are 60 platforms on everything from social security reform to university exchanges, and it doesn't really focus on the long-term issues. And the problem, as I see it, is there's a lot of process but not much substance. We have these executive meetings when the European Commission meet the Chinese government, but talking to people who take part of them, it doesn't seem that they actually achieve anything. The EU, the Commission, has failed to get the Chinese to open up their markets as they would wish. And then now we have a strategic dialogue between Catherine Ashton and Dai Bingguo, which sounds great, but talking to somebody who took part in the last one, she admitted that there wasn't actually anything of substance achieved in the dialogue, but it's good to talk and get to know the other person. However, I gather now there is some talk of actually, as a result of this dialogue, of inviting China to take part in some ESDP missions, possibly airport and port security in Africa, and possibly inviting China to participate in the EU military staff. Other people here may know more about that than I do. My own view is that the EU-China partnership should be more focused. To make it truly strategic, I would say the focus should be on, for the EU's point of view, opening up China, but also we have to make sure we are open to China. I was in Paris last week where a senior person in the government said we will never allow Huawei to buy French enterprises because we don't trust Huawei. France could perhaps look at the example of Britain, where Huawei is allowed to buy telecom enterprises, but with sort of safeguards to make sure that Huawei doesn't do the things it shouldn't do. So Huawei has to deal through a kind of black box, which is staffed by former British spooks, which makes it safe from the British government's point of view. And I think the French and others could learn something from that. A second priority should be Iran and proliferation more generally. I do think China could be more helpful on Iran than it is, and given that averting but the bombing of Iran seems to be a key strategic goal for all of us in the next few months, I think China could be more helpful. More generally, I think the EU needs to urge China to take global governance more seriously in the security side. I published a short study earlier this year called Russia, China and Global Governance, where I made the point that on security issues, China is very reluctant to get involved in international organizations and international treaties. And I think we need to urge it to do that. And finally, priority to keep the Chinese happy. I think technology transfer, the Chinese feel that we have unfair rules that discriminate against them, particularly on dual-use technology. And when it comes to environmental and energy technologies, which they need badly, I think we should probably look at the rules and see if we can be more generous. I'll just conclude with a comment on some of the problems in the EU-China relationship. I won't say much about the arms embargo, though it still annoys the Chinese a lot. It's not going to be lifted because the Americans don't want it to be lifted. It's simple as that. In my view, it probably should be lifted because we have in place a code of conduct which is actually a more suitable instrument for controlling the transfer of dangerous technologies to China. The other long-standing issue is market economy status, where pathetically the Europeans cannot agree on what their policy should be on market economy status. Some governments want to trade it off for Chinese concessions on market opening in China, but some European governments are keen, the more protectionist ones, are keen to keep withholding market economy status from China for a few more years, because that allows them to impose anti-dumping duties on China more easily than they otherwise could. So the EU is divided on that, to its shame. The solar panels dispute very visible in the last few weeks. Again, the French told me they're very annoyed that the Commission has allowed the Chinese to take over the European market in solar panels by not protecting our native industries enough. The Chinese talked to Merkel about it and seem to assume if they talk to Merkel that she can control the whole EU machine, which of course she cannot do because the European Commission is going to proceed with its action against Chinese producers of solar panels, whatever Mrs. Merkel thinks. Germany, of course, has been very hypocritical because it was actually a complaint by a German company which led the EU to set in motion its investigation of China. Last word, and I'll stop on Syria. This is potentially a difficult issue between the EU and China. As far as I can see, the Chinese share the Russian analysis of Syria in many ways. They do care about the principle of non-intervention. They think the West abused them over Libya, where we acted more strongly than the UNSC resolution allowed. And also the Chinese are quite happy to sort of block what the US wants on Syria. But the Chinese care much less than the Russians care. For the Russians, if you go to Russia and talk to them about Syria, as I've done, it's absolutely visceral, blocking the West on Syria. I think the Chinese don't care hugely, don't really want to have bad relations with the Arab world, but the Russians have told the Chinese, I believe, that we want you to support us on this, because don't forget we support you on the South China Sea, as the Russians are doing. So I don't see much chance of prizing China away from Russia on the Syria crisis. But I've had my 6 minutes now. Sorry to run over. I'll stop there. Thank you.